Alright guys, in today's video we're going to be doing some more maintenance, this time on transmissions and if you got four-wheel drive transfer cases. We're using this 2013 Avalanche as an example in today's video, but it's going to apply to several different years and models that I'll put in the video description. What we're after here is the 97,500 mile maintenance interval in this particular owner's manual, and the thing that we're talking about today is changing the automatic transmission fluid and filter and changing the transfer case fluid. So if the vehicle has four-wheel drive, this is a good chance, or actually this is a good opportunity to change out both at the same time. And unlike older GM trucks, the transfer cases on these modern ones use the same fluid, Dexron 6, as the transmission itself. So let's get going. All right, let's take a look at the service manual for this particular truck. It's going to cover the Escalade, the Yukon, the Avalanche, the Suburban, and the Tahoe. All these models have a similar powertrain. Volume 5 out of 5 is what we're looking at. First thing I'm going to show you here is how do you tell which of these transmissions you have, 6L80 or 6L90. You take a look in the glove box on the regular production option codes. There's a whole bunch of three digit or three alphanumeric codes in there, and RPO code for the 6L80 is going to be MYC and MYD for the 6L90. The other two things that are worth noting here is the transmission fluid is going to be Dexron 6. There's a part number here, but there's a lot of different part numbers for this. I'll put the most recent ones in the description. AC Delco keeps switching suppliers, so these numbers float around. On the other side, when we're doing a pan removal and filter replacement, the capacity for both the 6L80 and the 6L90 is going to end up being 6 quarts. So that's what you're going to need to have on hand, 6 quarts of AC Delco, Dexron 6. If we take a look at the procedure itself, automatic transmission fluid, pan and filter replacement. So it's not enough just to change the fluid. We got to change the filter. We can't change the filter if we don't remove the pan. When you go to shops and they just go do a flush, they're not changing the filter. In fact, in a lot of cases when you get a lot of mileage, they're just back flushing a lot of this crud into the transmission. So this is the preferred approach. That's why that's what's in the service manual here. Pull the pan, change the filter, change the filter bushing, and if necessary, change the gasket, although the gasket is reusable if it's a genuine GM one. The type of material it's made of is reusable. If you got something aftermarket in there, it's got to go. When you look at the instructions, they talk about getting the vehicle off the ground. Obviously, if you have a lift, that's the ideal situation, but if you don't, you need to somehow get it off the ground. I'm actually going to show you not getting this off the ground, just make it more likely what you might be doing in your driveway or garage. However, the challenge you're going to have is on these models, the crossover for the exhaust system is going to be running right along the back side of this pan. And there's not going to be enough clearance to remove the pan easily with that in the way, and so that's why they tell you to disconnect and lower the catalytic converter, and I'll show you what they show for that in just a moment. But we're going to attempt to do this without following this step and without damaging the exhaust system. We're not going to try to prise it down or pull on it or anything like that. I think there's enough clearance in here to wiggle this guy out if we remove the filter first. Reach your hand in there and remove the filter. We might be able to wiggle this guy out. And if not, then we'll just go ahead and follow the procedure I'm going to show you next. So let me go switch to the other book. So this is volume 3, and then in volume 3, they go over this procedure. So catalytic converter replacement with exhaust clamp. Some trucks are going to have 2 and then just the pipe. This particular truck has got 3. 2 converters here and then 1 there, and then there's the pipe and the clamp. So they're going to tell you if you've got skid plates to pull those, remove the transmission support cross member, disconnect both of the oxygen sensors in each place, and then there's going to be 3 nuts on studs on each one of these at the back of the exhaust manifolds. You're going to need to pull 3 on each side, and then there's this clamp nut, and they have to replace the clamp with a new one. It's not reusable. If it doesn't fall apart from the rust trying to get it off, it's just a one-time use thing anyway, so you're going to have to use a new one. As far as I know, there's no aftermarket substitute for this. So that clamp they're talking about is right here. That has to be replaced, and then these are the 3 nuts on each side that attach up to the exhaust manifolds. The other thing is you got to replace these exhaust gaskets there in here when you pull this down. So this is a lot of work just to do regular service maintenance on the transmission, so that's why we're going to try to avoid it. but we're also going to try not to do any damage in bending this. So let me get underneath the truck and show you what we're dealing with. All right, guys, under the truck, here's the driver's side catalytic converter, and right over there is the passenger side catalytic converter. And they both come together into this Y pipe right back here behind the transmission oil pan, which is located right here, and then you have this crossover pipe, and there's the obstruction I was referring to. So you've got at most about 2 fingers of space on both sides. Not enough to easily just drop the pan down. The pan's held on by 18 10-millimeter bolts. But looking at the clearance here, I think the best case is it's probably going to drop down part way and then get hung up down here, because what's going to happen is this part of the pan will hit the crossover, and then the back part of the pan will be levered up against the transmission, so it'll be sitting like this. So the only way I think that it'll come out without dropping this down, which is the objective of what we're going to try to do today, is I think that we will have to do 2 things. I think that we will have to kind of twist it or cock it and work on the space that we have here, because we don't have much space over there because of the welding of the Y pipe. And we may have to reach our hand in and siphon the oil out and get the filter out of the way so that we have some more sideways maneuverability. So we'll see how this goes. If we get stuck, then, worst case, we bolt it back on and we drop these guys down the way the service manual indicated. Before we get started, let me go show you that clamp that's at the back of this pipe before the 3rd catalytic converter on this particular truck. All right, guys, starting up from the Y of the crossover and coming in from the driver's side, and the pipe coming from the passenger side getting welded together, that's your Y. Following that Y pipe back, the first thing we see is the cross member the service manual was mentioning. That's held in by 2 bolts and nuts on either side. And then if we keep following that pipe, we hit the 3rd catalytic converter on this particular model. And then right behind that is this non-reusable band clamp that the service manual was referring to. This is going to have to either be cut or torched off due to corrosion, but regardless, it's not reusable. So that's the deal you'd have to do if you followed the service manual. This guy here has to come off. The 2 oxygen sensors left and right have to be disconnected. The 3 nuts holding the Y pipe on the right-hand side and the 3 holding it on the left-hand side have to be removed, and then the whole thing gets dropped down because the cross member is no longer in the way. That's a lot of work. However, for the dealership, it's not that much work. They've got the right tools. It's up on a lift. They can zip these things off. They can torch or cut this off. It's got to be replaced anyway, so you don't worry about the damage. And you can drop this down, pull your pan, do your service, and put it back together and reverse it. If you're diddling around trying to squeeze the pan out from around this, like we're going to try to do now, that could end up taking more time when you're being charged by the hour in the dealership, and they might not be as profitable than just dropping all this stuff and getting it out of the way. In our case, we're in a different kind of a budget, right? We're on a budget that's based less on time and based more on less aggravation and less chance of something else getting damaged, broken, having to be replaced. So we're going to go ahead and give that a shot. Let's get started. All right, guys, you're going to need a couple of tools for this. You're going to have 5 or 6 quarts coming out. We got an 8-quart drain pan here. And then to make it a little easier, because it's very wide with the valve body and all that, we're going to have a really wide Lyle catch pan on top of it. That'll make sure we don't get any spills, don't make any mistakes or mess up anything, right? So you can turn it around, move it around really easily, and it'll catch all the bolts and the filter that we drop in, so we don't have to worry about that either. All right, guys, first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go around. I'm not going to necessarily show you all of these, and we're going to just break the torque with a breaker bar and a 10-millimeter socket on these bolts. I'm just hoping that none of them are over-tightened. So that's why we're doing this step. And then we'll come around and we'll zip them off with an electric ratchet. Trying to do it one-handed here and keep it where you guys can see. All right, so I'm going to continue doing that, and we'll come back when we got all the torque broke on these, and we'll zip them off. All right, guys, we're just going to come through. I'm not going to be able to show all this because I got to go get on both sides of the truck, but we're just going to zip these off, and we're going to leave one on each end to hold the pan. right, so I'm going to flip to the other side. This is the one we'll leave on the front, and we'll leave one on the back on the caddy corner end over there. We'll pull those out, and then we'll go ahead and get this to separate from the gasket so we can start getting the oil out. All right, guys, so we've already got it running down on the back here. When I took and loosened that last bolt I meant to keep, you can see it's running down. We've got a wide catch pan here, which is helpful for these kind of situations. So we're just going to let that level run off, and then we're going to go ahead and pull that last bolt that's just held on by maybe 4 threads. Let the rest of that run off, and then we'll take the one off the top.
Go.
All right, let's get this last bolt off. We're probably going to take a small bath in this stuff. Maybe not. All right, good. So there's nothing holding it on the back now, fastener-wise. All right, now she should let down. And we'll be able to get the rest of that fluid out now. Yeah, you got to watch for stuff like that. You know, with these crossovers, they can obscure your line of sight. So we still have the one that we purposely left in the front towards the engine holding it. And I think I'm going to take that one out now too. There's nothing for you guys to see. You won't be able to see it, but I'll lift up on this a little bit. Take that off. That'll let us get a little bit more leverage on the pan and start to let it come down in the front a little bit more. All right. Yeah, so I can definitely see how this is doing exactly the way I predicted, right, guys? I told you it'd end up getting like a lever. It ended up getting stuck in here. All right, guys, we're just going to pump this fluid out of the pan into our drain pan here. And then we'll continue. All right, guys, we siphoned off as much of this as I think we can. Let's see if we can get the filter to let go. Perfect. All right. And then I think we'll be able to maneuver the filter out of here. We're really going through a lot of convoluted dancing here just to avoid pulling off this exhaust. See if I can figure out a way to maneuver this filter out. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just leave him in the pan. Not ready to give up yet. All right, let me go on the other side and see if I see any way out of this, guys. All right, guys, we're on the passenger side now. I'm going to have to go under the hood and unlock the dipstick. And if we push it out of the way, that's one of the obstructions we had. We're going to push it back into the tube like that. Get that out of the way. From the passenger side, we can get this filter, I think. At least it looks a lot more friendly to come out. Let's give it a shot and see. Might block your view for a moment here, but I'm just going to try to finagle it past whatever it looks like it's hung up on here. Loop this guy around like that. He's out of there. Might as well get the gasket out of the way here too. Oh, guys, you think this is easier than just dropping the exhaust crossover, right? All right. But I do think we can get this to fit. I really do. It's just a matter of figuring out what our clearance is. I'd like to get this gasket out of the way. He's hung up on something back here in the back. Can't tell. Just a hair more would be fine. All right, guys, well, at least with the filter out of the way, I could get up in here and try to see. And actually, you know, if you wanted, you could do the service like this, right? I mean, you have access to put the filter back in and get inside here and clean, but I'm not ready to give up on this yet. Let me go take a gander at analyzing this one more time just before you give up on trying to get it out this way. All right, guys, I think I've got this figured out. You see where my finger is here in the film? If we zoom in here, this whitish plastic aspect of the valve body, right back there, that's where the obstruction is. It's a shame if the engineers had just accounted for maybe 1/4 of an inch difference. This wouldn't be such a pita to do without pulling the exhaust system. But that is the primary obstruction that keeps catching the back of the pan, that raised area of the valve body, back electronics there in the back. In the front, you've got to take into account the cooling lines. All right, so these cooling lines here can also get in the way. But I think if we go under the cooling lines and twist it, we might get enough clearance to get this out. Or let's just give it another shot before we give up. So I'm going to run it under these cooling lines. And we can get it to here now. If we can just get it a little further, so let's get it past the cooling lines on that side, we would have this. It's like they get you 6 ways from Sunday on this. Let's try this. Let's go over the cooling lines. Just be gentle, right? Because you don't want to damage anything. Yeah, so right here we hit obstruction there. We had more progress going under the cooling line. If we can just get past on this end. I mean, I think that would do it, guys. If we could just get this cooling line problem solved, she'd come out. She would definitely come out. Each of these vehicles is slightly different, right? And I'm sure some of them will have the 1/4 inch of clearance that you need just from manufacturing tolerances, but this one doesn't have it. So, I mean, I might find it easier just to release these cooling lines from their retainer than to pull the exhaust system and to give us that little bit that we could just get this guy to go, right? Because he's just hung up right here. If we could just get him unhung up from this cooling line, we would be in business. I don't want to bend the cooling lines. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on them because that could cause a leak at where they attach. All right, guys,
even with that cooling pipe out of the way, it's not going to be enough. I did some measurements and I looked inside with a camera, and there's just no way. There's no way this is going to come off without removing the exhaust pipe here. And I am not going to fight with these rusty bolts. So you guys might see I'm copping out, but I feel there's plenty of room to work in here. I've already cleaned up the gasket mating surface. I'll get these lights out of the way and maybe have a little bit less brightness so you can see. And I've already cleaned out inside the pan. Got all the fluid out of the pan. We're ready to put the new gasket and filter in there. I'm going to go check out the bushing for the filter on the other side and see if it has to be removed or that has to be replaced, but we have access to that as well. Let me show you inside the pan and where the magnet is with the camera. Here's a view on the camera, guys. You can see there's the magnet. I've cleaned it off. We didn't find anything but very fine dust particles, which is normal and perfectly fine for the mileage on this 6L80. And we've cleaned out inside the pan. There's going to be a little bit of runoff coming down from the valve body still, but you have plenty of room to get in here and clean everything out. It's way less of a PETA than trying to fight these rusty exhaust fasteners, that's for sure. So let me give you a shot in the rear area as to what we were hung up on. All right, guys, then here's kind of like the rear area. I was telling you, like think of it like the back shelf area of the pan. Trying to reach my hand back under there. You see we got all that cleared off as well. So you got just enough room to get your hand back in there and clean all of that, as well as get the gasket surface clean. Let me go show you the other side where the filter goes. All right, folks, here's the other side. Now we can see the bushing for the filter right here. So the snout of the filter fits into this rubberized bushing, and that's what holds it in. And we've inspected this, and there's no tears or damage or cracking to it. I'll show you how you would get it out, but in this case, I am not going to remove this one. And that's not an unusual thing. Sometimes I do leave these in here if everything looks fine, because it is kind of a bear to get them out, even if you had the pan out of the way. All right, coming back to our service procedure and getting ready to go back in the other direction now and salvage what we can of this process. We've cleaned up all of our 18 10mm bolts, and when we put them back in, they're going to be put in at 80 inch-pounds of torque, according to the service manual. They tell you to take a look at the fluid you took out. That's always a good idea. We're going to go back to page 476 here, like they suggest. And the main reason for looking at this is if it's very dark or black and has a burnt odor, then you should be checking the pan for excessive metal particles and debris. A small amount of friction material in the bottom pan is a normal condition, and that's what we had. I'll show you that in just a minute. But no large pieces and no actual broken off pieces of metal. That's what you don't want to see. Also, you don't want to see it cloudy or milky, because that could mean that you got coolant contaminating the transmission fluid. Problem with the radiator tank where the cooler is. Now here's what our fluid looks like. And not much you can see hopefully against this background, but for 91 and change thousand miles, it's about what you'd expect. It's still got a tint of red to it, but it's obviously very worn. These particular transmissions run very hot. All right, so now they talk about changing out the gasket. It says it's reusable, depending on the condition, right? So you can reuse it, but you need to put a new filter in. The new filter is going to be this part number, GM24236933. Open this up just to speed it up, but what's in here is just a filter, right? There's no bushing or anything like this. So, typically you would just pop a new AC Delco filter in there and move on. If you are planning to change the bushing, I'll put that part number in the video description. Here's the gasket for this transmission, 24224781. You're going to end up needing 6 quarts of Dexron 6, like you see here. Now, these part numbers here are just to happen to be the current ones that are available. Like I was mentioning earlier, the suppliers, vendors change, so it could be different depending on when you go to buy it. This is what was available when I went to buy it. Here's the rag we used to clean the magnet. And so what you can see is it's just covered with a very fine metallic dust. Just normal wear and tear of the clutch friction material in between the
clutches. There's going to be just normal bare metal spacer plates, and this is all just normal wear and tear for the mileage. The other parts I have that I'll share you numbers with. If we did decide to fight with that exhaust system, I do have the parts. You can tell, it's not a shortage of parts. It's just I don't want to deal with the hassle of burning the whole day on it. This is that band clamp by the third cat, 207-79-889. Then this is one of the exhaust donuts you'd have to replace, 1503-5747. And this is the other one on the other side, 1507-7362. Right, so that's what you'd have to do there. If for some reason you had to torch off the nuts, the replacement number on these is 1503-2594. I had 6 of them, right, just in case I ended up doing that. And if I had to replace the studs, 1158-9264, right? So those are all the parts to do the job. It's just a question of whether you want to, put the time and effort into doing that degree. All we wanted to do on this was get the fluid changed out and get the filter changed out, and we're going to be able to do that without going any further and fighting any of this stuff, right? So let me show you how to get this all reassembled from this awkward position that we're in. All right, I've elected to replace the gasket. These locating nubs, there's one on this side and there's one on this side. You're going to find matching holes in the pan and the transmission to help you locate this in. We're going to get this located first, and then we're going to do the filter second. All right, now let's see if we can remember how we got this thing in here, or out of here rather. I know we twisted it like this. And we get it upside down now. We need to get it flipped in the other direction. How many people are voting for dropping the exhaust crossover? Huh? Where maybe I can see a little better. Try to strategize how we got this thing out of here to begin with. All right, guys, I'm going to have to get in front where the camera is for a second. Let me move the camera out of the way and get this positioned. All right, let's see if we can finagle it. Ah, there we go. Success. We get it. As long as you get it in the pan, the battle's halfway over. Let me see if I can get a position where I can see how to push it up. And then we're just going to take some of this loose fluid in here, lube up the snout, push it into place. There we go. All right, snapped in. Good. All right, now we just need to get the gasket back where it goes. One of those nubs goes in this hole right here. And the other side goes in this little hole right there. There's a similar one in the back. So we're just going to get that all repositioned. Just like that. And then get a couple of bolts here. We get this started by hand, just a couple of them. We'll do the same thing in the back. We'll just make sure that we keep this guy lined up as we go get the back lined up the same way. All right, guys, we're just finishing up the torque to 80 inch-pounds here. This one, you want to skip every other one and kind of go opposite corners to get even tightening. At this point, I've done almost all of them. I'm just leaving a couple to show you. Go this guy in the corner here, and then we'll go jump around and get this one in the back corner that I skipped when I made the first pass. Right over here. I'm showing you these because you can see the nubs very evident in these particular locations.
right, so these two 80 inch-pounds. All right, so we'll go make another pass over this. Now we're going to go, normally I'd say brake clean all this off, but we still had to do the transfer case and change the fluid on that. So we'll brake clean all this off after we finish the transfer case, and we'll hose both of them down at once. For now, let's just go under the hood and go ahead and top things off. All right, we still have this left out from where we moved it when we were fiddling with that pan. I want to make sure we get it all cleaned off on here, and we'll use that to check later. So remember, our service manual indicated that we're going to want to put in 6 quarts. So we will start with a gallon, 3.785 liters, just happens to be exactly 4 U.S. quarts. I'm not sure why these AC Delco packages do not show the U.S. measuring system when the service manual clearly talks about things in the U.S. measuring system. All right, we're going to put the first 4 here. We're going to run all this in first. Sometimes, if you don't hold these things just right, like I just did, I let it tilt on me, and you'll get a little bit of a leakage. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and top this off, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to check if you got it full. All right, guys, we've put 5, this is going to be 4, this is 5, this is 6. We've put almost all this in here. I saved just a few ounces, 4 to 6 ounces here on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and do the transfer case now. Then we're going to brake clean everything off, and then we're going to start it up, and we're going to check the level on the transmission. I'm going to go ahead and lock the dipstick back into place before we actually start anything up. We'll also take care of doing the transfer case fluid change. Now, in my case, this particular vehicle I'm working on, this 2013 Avalanche, has RPO NQH, which is a Z71 variant of the transfer case. Of the MP3023 or 3024, it'll take 1.6 quarts of Dexron 6, just like the transmission itself. And then when we get ready to put the oil and fill plugs back on, they'll be going on at 13 foot-pounds apiece. There are some other types of transfer cases you might encounter, but the procedure is going to be very similar to what I'm showing on this one. All right, so if you have four-wheel drive, you'll also want to take off and drain the transfer case. Now we're going to take the fill plug off first because it's a good idea to check and see if it's overflowed. And it can get overflowed if you got a seal failure, and then you can end up getting fluid coming in from the transmission into the transfer case. This is the first time this has been done, so it's going to be kind of tough. I'm just using a breaker bar to get it started, and then we'll switch to a ratchet. We'll do the same thing on the drain plug. We'll just kind of break the seal here. And then we'll switch to a ratchet and work it off. Block your view here for just a moment. All right, so we just had a little bit. So we don't have an overfill situation, so we don't need to worry about that anymore. Get that off. Now we'll go ahead and drain her out. There's no filter or anything back here to change. Now what we are going to look at, though, is we got a lot of little metal filings stuck to the magnet. We're going to clean that up and see what we got there, make sure we don't have any chunks. You can have a little bit of metal debris just because of it being never changed before. Just go ahead and let that pee out, and we'll come back. All right, guys, we're about done here. Let's go take a look at what we got going on this plug. All right, so we definitely got a lot of small little pieces of metal stuck on the magnet. I'm just going to go ahead and pinch all that off.
Yeah, so all of this is really fine dust. And so I'm going to just attribute that to what you would normally get the very first time that you're changing this fluid, right? Because it's only changed for the first time at 97,500 miles. So you've just got almost 100,000 miles of normal break-in and wear on these parts. So I'm just going to go ahead, keep cleaning this up, maybe give it a squirt of brake clean, and we'll get the drain plug back in, and I'll show you what we're filling it with. Okay, just a real quick shot from a service bulletin that gives information about what's normal and not normal on these magnetic drain plugs in these transfer cases. You can see these pictures of normal condition. It is completely normal to have this kind of hair look of metal particles caught up in the magnetic field of the drain plug. What you don't want to have is something like this, where you have slivers or chunks of metal attached to the magnet. That's bad. This is okay. So what we pulled out was okay. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and clean up some of this. We're going to have a little bit of debris in the threads there. We want to get that out as well. Just kind of rotate the rag around on the inside of the threads, because we're still going to have some of this same material that the magnet was grabbing before. All right. Now we've brake cleaned our plug, and we're going to torque it down to what we saw in the service manual, which is 13 foot-pounds. And you don't want to over torque it, because these are soft metals. As soon as you torque it, you're done. We're going to take our fill plug back out. Go ahead and give him a shot of brake clean too. Get this residual amount of fluid that we had here in the threads. And what we're going to be topping her off with is AC Delco Dexron 6. So these transfer cases use the same fluid as the transmission, unlike older transfer cases on earlier types of GM trucks. So I'm not going to be able to show you filling this in here because of the awkward spaces we got. But basically what I prefer to do is screw one of these kind of deals onto the top of the quart bottle. Right, it just gives you like a flex tube, and it lets you squeeze it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and load this guy up, and we'll go ahead and pick it up when we're done. All right, guys, we're just loading the last of this first quart in. You saw in the service manual, we're going to take one whole quart, and then we're going to do 0.6 of another quart. So just giving you a view how this tool works. Makes it very handy. I don't have the truck on a lift. I'm just on the passenger side so that I can get the quart up to the higher end of the transfer case. And we're just going to keep putting this in until she squirts out. Now, that little bit coming out right now is just because I let it move. And we got a little bit of a drip. That's not that she's ready to be full yet. So we'll come back when we get her full. All right, guys. We're ready to put the last 0.6 in here. So we're going to go kind of slow so we don't overfill it. Not yet, almost. There we go. I think we're just about there. Yep, we're there. So when you start getting it running out of the fill hole, you're done. So at this point you can close off your little spout. We'll get what's running out here, and we'll torque the fill plug down. All right, guys, let's wipe that up. Now you're going to have a little bit of a drip maybe still coming out. That's okay, just like when we first took it off. That's just confirmation that we've got it right there at the top. And again, same 13 foot-pounds of torque on this guy that we did on the drain plug. So we're just going to go ahead and torque this guy up, and then we're going to go spray everything here on the outside down with brake clean to keep it all nice and clean. And we're done with the transfer case fluid change. All right, back to the service manual. We got the transfer case done. That went without a hitch, thank God. All right, so we're coming back to this guy. We're going to get the engine heated up, transmission fluid temperature between 160 and 200. This is the most accurate method, the hot check procedure. And what we're going to do is, this stuff is kind of obvious. You guys can read along. What I'm looking for is to see if they tell you anything specific other than what I'm going to show you on the stick. Yeah, so I'm going to show you this on the dipstick. The safe operating fluid is within the hot crosshatch band on the dipstick. If it's not within the hot band and the transmission fluid temperature is in this range, then you need to either add or drain fluid to bring the level into the hot. Now, draining without a drain plug, right? You know what that means is you're going to have to go down there and siphon off some. This is why I did not pour all 6 quarts in to begin with, right? You start off with 5, then maybe add 5 1/4, maybe 5 1/2 until you hit this sweet spot. It doesn't take much fluid, generally less than 1 pint, in order to move that mark, right? So you don't want to overfill it. That's worse. That's as bad as underfilling it. All right, so that's what we need to do here. So let's go ahead and get it started. Now, what I didn't see here, and I'll tell you to do, is while you're warming it up, work it through the gears. Park, reverse, neutral, drive, hang out in each one of those with the brake pedal pressed for about 3 to 5 seconds. And just do that a couple of times and give it a pause, then do it a couple more times. You'll be able to tell the transmission fluid temperature using the driver information center. All right, on the series of vehicles this video covers, you can find this transmission temperature in the driver information center right underneath the tachometer. I'm going to come over here on the driver information center buttons, this button on the top. I'm going to tap that one. If you watch over here underneath the tachometer, I'm going to tap it 1, 2, and now we're at transmission temperature. And so what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this guy to get up to at least 160 degrees. No more than 210 degrees. So once it gets to 160, you can shut it off. If it goes up to 170 or 180, that's fine. If it goes up to 210, you're right on the border, right? So I'd say you want to let it cool down a little bit. You saw what the manual said. You want to get this reading spot on. So you can let it idle. It'll probably go up, as you see the time I'm talking here, it looks like it's going to want to go up another couple of degrees. It's probably going to go up 3 or so degrees every few minutes. So we're going to wait until this gets up to 160. All right, guys, it's at 167, right? So that's good enough. So let's go ahead, shut the engine off. Let's go check our levels. All right, let's see if this job is finally done. So she's going to be hot now, which is what you want, but it also means you got to be careful you don't burn yourself. All right, so if we look at this crosshatch pattern, it's going to be upside down for you guys, but there's the cold mark. All right, if I could turn it a little bit. And there's the hot mark with the crosshatches. And we want to be in between all of that. So let's see where we landed. All right, so we let it run up, so we ruined our reading. All right, so you got to be careful you don't let the thing run upwards. Let me do it again. But we're definitely not under. All right, this time you'll keep holding it down. Get it on, flip it around here. What do we got? We're right on the money. Maybe just a little bit below where we want to be. are right there. So if we zoom in a little bit, okay, we're just a little bit below the crosshatch. So we're going to add just a little bit of fluid while it's still hot. Adding a little bit ain't going to hurt anything, and we're going to check it again. Turn it off. All right, guys, let's check it again. Okay, now she looks good. She's right past the T into the crosshatch on the hot, so that is what we want. Any further and we would have been over. So we're done. So this is hopefully a useful video for you. It's not, I'm not particularly happy with how the transmission part came out because of not being able to pull that pan off, but hopefully you guys got something out of it. And the transfer case went really well, and we got the maintenance work that we wanted to do done without creating more problems. If you wanted to remove that bushing, what would you have done, right? So I tend to change them every other service interval myself. And when you pull one out that's recessed like that, I like to use a tool like this. This is a kind of tool where you push it up in there, and as you twist it, these little ears will open up, and that'll let you pull that bushing out. The service manual mentioned using a screwdriver or a pair of snap ring pliers. You could use that too, but you got to be real careful that you don't scratch up the aluminum bore when you're going in like that. So it's very soft metal, the bushing, and it's not too hard to get out, but it's really awkward with the pan in the way. Although the next time we do this vehicle, if we service this again, we're going to have to fight that. All right, so anyway, if you got questions or comments, leave them below. If you thought that we should have just bit the bullet and pulled and fought the rust and pulled the exhaust manifold crossover, go ahead and let me know that too. I'd be curious how many people felt that that was better than what we did here. I feel like we've got the right filter and fluid change, we've got the right level, and we've got everything back up to speed and meeting whatever we need to do for the maintenance, including for the transfer case. We've checked for leaks, we've brake cleaned everything off, and we're good to go. Hope you found this video useful. If it did, it saved you some money, taught you something, and you found something useful on it, pay it forward, hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.